Welcome to the Yeoman Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Graham. On Yeoman, I'll speak with people who build and grow things, people who create art, and people who think about community, meaning, and purpose. My guest today is Jaime Izurieta. His business, Storefront Mastery, helps Main Street districts and retailers succeed in a world where the playing field has become so heavily tilted toward their big box competitors. Jaime is the author of several books, the first of which shares the name of his business, Storefront Mastery. I describe it as a tactical guide to merchandising for independent retailers. His most recent book, which I have received a few days ago, is Main Street Mavericks. The subtitle is Innovation, Leadership, and a Bright Future for Main Street Businesses. Let's see, I'll read to you the mission from it. This is page 15 here. His mission: to ignite a renaissance in downtowns, turning them into the epicenters of community and commerce, where every street corner whispers an invitation to an adventure yet to be written. I hope you can see why I wanted Jaime to join me on Yeoman. He's both a compelling advocate for small business and an articulate student of how our built environment came to look as it is today. Jaime, welcome. Thank you for joining me on Yeoman.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I am incredibly happy to be here. So before I joined, I've always heard this word. So now, first, English is not my first language. So sometimes you hear these words and that's a very cool word, right? So yeoman is a very cool word if you're not a native English speaker. And I've always associated it with farmers, right? And that's the meaning of yeoman, a farmer. So I'm a free farmer, let's say, right? And it has an exception of, country building in America and everything. But it also means the cavalry. The free farmers were also part of a cavalry that was, defending values. And I think that is very appropriate for the podcast. I commend you on choosing the title, and I'm very happy to be in the cavalry.
Oh, thank you. Thrilled to have you a part of it. I think this is the first time the title of the podcast has ever come up.
Really?
8 or 9 episodes. It's probably a good time for me to share the provenance of it. I was at a conference in December, maybe November, December last year, and it was a tech conference, a VC conference, and all the businesses this fund was, not all of them, most of the businesses this fund had been talking about investing in were enterprise type businesses serving the enterprise market, big businesses. And I, for a long time, I've felt like through general, whatever you want to call it, turbo capitalism, as Ashley Colby Fitzgerald calls it. Other people do too, or late stage capitalism. I like to call it cronyism or corporatism. Whatever it is, I feel like this playing field has been tilted against small business owners in a way that unduly advantages the enterprise. And we've seen this big decline in entrepreneurship and autonomy and small business ownership over the last 100 years. I don't think that's a natural byproduct of like the regular market at work or any of those sorts of things. I feel like it's kind of a artificial, like interventions in the market have caused it. And as I was listening to all these presentations from these businesses that served the enterprise overwhelmingly, literally were creating better compete against the small business. I was like, God, enough advantages from policy, subsidy, whatever, like, market, whatever it is, they have enough advantages. We do not need to press the advantage on behalf of the gentry any longer, so that increasingly the rest of us become peasants. We need a torch for the yeoman. And I was very much thinking about it in the farmer sense. I hadn't researched the word in a big deal in a big way. So you've actually taught me something new. I love that we're part of the cavalry. We hope to be. So finally that word hit me, and I was like, that's, I had been waiting to do this fun podcast for, I don't know, years, mainly because I didn't have a name for it. And so once I got the name, I had no excuse to keep going. So thanks for bringing that up. Delighted that we're fellow members of this cavalry. And you're doing good work in support, in contrast to those. And I begrudge people for wanting to build great solutions to help people do better. It rubbed me the wrong way that no one is out there, or that so few people were out there trying to advance the interests of small business owners, yeomen, startups, those kinds of things. So thank you for doing that. Is it so? Where I'm in my home in Atlanta. It is glorious. Today is the 5th day of beauty here in Atlanta. How are things for you, and where are you?
Okay, I am in Montclair, New Jersey. This is about 40 minutes west of New York City. So basically, we live in the orbit of this giant behemoth. And it is glorious outside, but we are at a stage you were a few weeks ago with the pollen. So you'll probably hear me cough a little bit. It's the pollen. It is glorious outside.
I remember that was not long ago here, but we're past it, I think. So when as I read the book, and I admit that I only got it a few days ago, so I'm not all the way through it. You said that English is obviously not your native tongue, though it's outstandingly written, or the English is. And as I read it, I felt like it was a bit of a very kindly, encouragingly, and positively written guerrilla man for how to compete and win in an unconventional way that you are uniquely skilled at, where the small Main Street retailer has specific advantages they need to remember and they need to play to. And so as I was reading it, I was like, this is kind of like a guerrilla manifesto. Like, don't play the big retailer's game. You play your own game. What are you great at? And you'll succeed at that. Did you ever think about that at all as you were writing it?
That is exactly what I thought about. That has been my work for the last few years. I have to shout out to the great people who read my book in its initial stages and helped me, make sense of a lot of what you read there. There was a lot of help, especially my friend.
Your forward. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He wrote the forward, and then of course Kate Giovanbattista, who was also instrumental in reading and helping. And I come from a long line of editors and publishers. My family has a local bookstore, and my family also has a publishing house. So I drew a lot from their expertise in how to edit and just all the tools and everything that you have for editing and trying to make sense when it's not your language.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great read. I highly recommend it. We'll make sure to share where people can buy the book.
Thank you.
And learn more about Storefront Mastery. He begins. I thought this was you writing until I got to the end of the foreword, but this is probably a good place to start. He begins by defining prosperity, like what prosperity means and what it is not. This is Jeff Bueller. Is that how you pronounce the name?
Bueller.
Yeah, Bueller, who is the former state coordinator of Main Street, New Jersey. And he says prosperity. He doesn't equate prosperity with growth, and he distinguishes between those two things. Do you have a point of view on how would you define prosperity?
I think that growth, like I think what Jeff says there is very, very intelligent, and it's a lot in line also with what I advocate in the book. Yes, prosperity means a different kind of growth to me. Prosperity means a growth that people can benefit from. Prosperity means a growth that is precisely not this big enterprise growth that you were talking about in the beginning, but more of a local, family, and individual growth that allows people and families to have a better quality of life. Right? So this is how I see it. And this is part of the premise of the book is just what you said before. It's a way to advocate for the uniqueness that local businesses have, the uniqueness that local communities have, and the uniqueness that the PPS factor, which is what I'm beginning to call it. Of course, after I wrote the book, this came to mind. And the PPS factor is the factor of place, propinquity, and scale. So place, of course, you are in a place, and this is unique. You are only your business is only in this place, and you only have these neighbors, and you only have this whatever across the street, and the building is unique, right? Because you're not in a series produced environment. You're in a unique place in a downtown. And then there's the propinquity. I love this word. This word means proximity with familiarity. This is what propinquity means. And so basically,
I've never heard this word before.
It's a beautiful word. It's a beautiful word, propinquity.
Yeah.
So if you are a local business in a community, you're not only operating within that community, but also you're operating in familiarity with that community, right? And then, of course, the scale. If you are an independent local business, you are not something that's being controlled from corporate headquarters in a city 2,000 miles away. The decisions that you're making are right there, right? And you're looking at the street, and you're looking at your leaders, and you're looking at your neighbors, and you're looking at what happens. And this is how you make the decisions. So the decisions are inevitably going to be a more human scale decisions. So you have these factors, right? The PPS, the place, the propinquity, and the scale. And basically the big businesses cannot compete with businesses in downtowns, because if you want to buy a pair of socks, you'll probably buy it online. If you need to buy, I don't know, something fast for a birthday party, you just go to the next big box and buy it really fast for the party. But if you want something, if you want an experience, if you want a more committed relationship with whatever you're buying, because you believe in the values, because you believe in the principles, because whatever, what local businesses offer is distinctly more profound, is distinctly more hospitable, and it's of a different nature, because you don't go there to buy something. You go there to invest in your well-being, because the stores are awesome, because the enclosure is great, because the scale is fantastic, because you feel well, because they smell nice, because they know your name. There's a lot of different factors that make you attached to these businesses. So they're basically impossible to compete with. There's no way that a huge corporation can have enough people on the ground looking at what makes a community tick and creating unique stores or unique footprints for each one of their communities. They thrive on standardization. They thrive on economies of scale. They thrive on making huge purchases of, I don't know how many millions or dozens of millions of dollars that need to be something standardized, right? There's no way that they can go into so much detail. The fact that local businesses can, the fact that local businesses must, because this is the environment they're working on, makes them unique. And so, yeah, they are well positioned, and they are and they have been part of an ecosystem that's been growing for the last 40 years. The Main Street movement has been around since 1980. They have been investing, I don't know how many millions of dollars in creating these fantastic communities, and they have a return of about $24 per each dollar invested. I was just looking at the numbers. I will tell you why later. I was just looking at the numbers of the results that the Main Street movement has in the past 45 years, and it's just been astounding, right? But then some of them have already achieved a place that they can say, yes, I succeeded. Every single goal that I had from the time that my Main Street was designated until now have been achieved. And I need to keep growing. And this is where that growing and prosperity conflict or whatever is arises, right? So these people say, okay, I have achieved every single goal I've set myself. And now what can I do? What is my path to move forward, to progress without growing too much and losing my nature? And this is what the premise of the book is. There's a new economic paradigm, which is called the experience economy. And if you look at how the economy has evolved in the past, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of years, I guess, since we first started trading, there's a product. So I take the product and I sell you the product, right? And I give you carrots, you give me oranges, right? At some point, we decide that maybe I don't need oranges, so we create this thing called money that allows you to pay me in, I don't know, money. And I give you my carrots, and I can take that money and buy not oranges because I don't need them, but buy tomatoes somewhere else. That's the first basic stage, right? And then I realize that if I take those carrots and I make carrot juice, I can charge you more because you are not using your time into making the juice. I am putting some of my time in making the juice. I am adding value to the carrots. So I am selling you something with an added value, which of course gives me more money and frees up your time so you can be doing other things. The next stage is we get together and we say, okay, how are we going to help the carrot growers so that they can not only make juice and sell, but make other products and sell in other places? What is the service that we are going to provide them so that they can grow, right? So we create the service economy. And then when things get more complex and everything gets commoditized, right? So now a service is commoditized. You can go and buy and purchase TurboTax on online, and you have the app on your phone, and everything is prepared for you, and you can just do your taxes in, I don't know, maybe half a day, right? Because you purchased this service, which comes as a product. And we're seeking something else now because we're always seeking something else. People are always seeking the next frontier, right? So people realize that the way in which they deliver these products and services can actually become a product in and of itself. So I don't go to a store and buy a t-shirt and give people money and get a t-shirt and leave. I go to the place and I establish a relationship and I get into a conversation and I learn that the t-shirts are made with these fibers that are collected from whatever by the families that do something, and then some of the proceeds are donated to whatever. And it becomes an hour or 2 hours of my time in which I am there learning. I am there absorbing much of what they have put into the decoration of the place, the smells, the colors, the textures, everything that they have done to keep me there. So this is what the big change is that before we were just looking to get people's money. Anyone who was selling something was just trying to get people's money. And now what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people's time, right? We need people to engage with us. We need people to learn about what we do and interact with our brands. And then they become great ambassadors of our brand. Then they become great proponents of our brand. And of course, they become the greatest advocates of, hey, look at what these guys are doing. And we're capturing people's times. This is what the experience economy is about. And the people who have done
it strikes me more like a live performance, or what one might be buying when they're going to see a live performance than what they might be buying when they're going to get a commodity product. Two words that recur throughout at least the how much of the book I've gotten through so far is authenticity and story.
Correct.
And what you just described reminds me of a live performance for someone. Like you're there, it's totally authentic. You're experiencing something that's very special, and what you're paying for is not to sit in the room or sit in the venue or whatever. You're paying to experience this great, to be a part of in some way. And certainly every live musician will tell you that they're experiencing something themselves with the audience, but to participate in this great exchange.
It's absolutely what it is. So the proponents of this concept are Joe Pine and Jim Gilmore. They wrote a book in 1999 called The Experience Economy. And the subtitle of the book says, every business is, work is theater and every business is a stage.
Huh.
Right? So what they're saying is the interaction that people have with a business will be greatly enhanced when that interaction has a performative aspect, right? So if you think who has mastered this is the hospitality industry. I was one of the books that were very important in the creation of Main Street Mavericks is a book by Will Guidara, who was the owner of 11 Madison Park, which came to be the #1 restaurant in the world. Right, and the story of how they took the restaurant from being a great restaurant that had amazing food and great service to be the #1 restaurant in the world is a story of hospitality, performance, theater, and experience. So essentially, when you went and ate there, you came out a different person after, and that's what they're seeking. And that's what experience creators are seeking, right? You go to It's a Small World and you come out of It's a Small World, and there has been a transfer, maybe at 49 years old, not, but my 8-year-old self when I first saw it, absolutely transformed. It changes the way you see everything, and all the games and all the play and everything you do after is like, you have this incredible parameter, and it does the same thing. It seeks people's time. It seeks people's attention. It immerses people in this place of reflection. You have the prerogative of making it super light and just receive people and just a grinder, or you have the prerogative, the opportunity to make it very meaningful, to make it transformative, to make it that whenever someone has an encounter with your business, they come out a different person because they've learned a new word, because they've discovered a new flavor, because have learned a new piece of history, but mainly because that has unleashed some thought process that has made them look at things differently. And that is what the experience economy essentially is about. And that is what my book is ultimately about. We have worked really hard. We have achieved most, if not all, of the goals that we have set out to achieve. And now the next frontier is becoming hospitality entities. It's becoming hosts of a beautiful downtown that has a lot to offer. Not just one restaurant, not just one coffee shop. It has an entire atmosphere, an entire feeling, an entire experience to offer. So we become the hosts. Yeah.
And you write, to interject here from the book, you're talking about your friend Edna's store. Every item in Edna's shop carries a story, a narrative thread connecting it to its origins, creators, or journey to her storefront. And you have lots of little vignettes throughout describing that same sort of thing. It reminded me something my wife tells me often. a quote from Maya Angelou. At the end of the day, people don't remember what you said or did. They remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And I kept thinking about that quote as I was reading this book.
Absolutely.
I want to come back to the question of like the success. And we texted a bit about this. Maybe we can explore it right now, or maybe it'll come up later. My sense is that I don't perceive the Main Street movement. Probably the way to ask it is by what measures have the Main Street movement been successful? That's probably a good way for me to start this question.
Yes. So this is a movement that started when it was a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So their initial goal was, how do we make historic preservation attractive? How do we make historic preservation something that really revitalizes communities as opposed to just buildings? So their program has 4 points of revitalization, one of which is the economic development. And then there's the arts and the community and whatever. But I am focusing, of course, on the economic development. And they have set a lot of goals for themselves in the past. Essentially bringing buildings back from collapse. If you toured main streets in the 80s and 90s, it was a nascent movement, and most of the main streets you saw had old and derelict buildings that were not that have not been touched or maintained properly in the past 50 or 60 years, maybe more. You had businesses that have zero innovation, just businesses that were lingering and resisting from the height of the mall, right? And so this movement is basically wants to bring people back to downtown. And I think that has been a resounding success. If you look at I think they have like 1,200 accredited programs. And of course, they are not the only main streets in the country. There's I'm going to say a number that I think I saw somewhere. It's like 27,000 municipalities or local government entities in the US. So 1,200 is a very tiny percentage of that. There's tons of
that's kind of where I drove back from the Low Country to Atlanta this weekend. Through a great many main streets. Think about North South Carolina or Bamberg, South Carolina, and they didn't seem very successful to me. So I guess those are some of the 27,000 that are not included in the 1,200 or so that the Main Street movement is focused on.
Correct. It's very hard to be accepted. They have to go through a grueling process, which keeps a rigor, and it really shows some commitment. And I think they have been incredibly successful in bringing back the allure of Main Street and downtown, right? So there's lots of local businesses. The numbers, like I told you before, the numbers are really amazing. How many net employment they have created, how many investments they have brought. So there has been a path. They call it one of the most successful economic development tools in the nation. And I think if you look at where they were, the ones that are members right now, where they were and the path, the trajectory that they have had and where they are now, I think some are really, really fantastic. Like there's a few in South Carolina. I think Florence is one, and they have
Ain't no town like Flowtown. Shout out to all our Florence listeners.
They have won awards, and it's a very dynamic community that really turned around from whatever luck they had in the 80s and 90s. So in that sense, I think they have been very successful. And I think also that their success can be also measured in the number of communities, of Main Street communities, that they actually manage to revitalize. And that number is growing every single year. and the number of members is also growing every single year. And so every time there's more communities that are integrated into this and are growing. But there's, like I said before, there's a plateau where they achieve, where every extra building that they rehab is going to be marginal because most have been already rehabbed. Every additional business that comes is going to be marginal because they already have very low vacancy. Every new job that is created is going to be marginal because since they have so little vacancy and their footprints are small, they have already at capacity in terms of job creation. So where do they go? What is the next frontier? Right, the next frontier is turning into hospitality, turning into hosts of downtown, and making each one of these downtowns a round experiential thing that you don't just go there to buy something or to eat something. You go there because, like Maya Angelou says, because of how the place makes you feel, right? And this is where they work in, and they can work in now.
In the experience economy, which that makes sense to me, that we're well on our main streets. Our main streets are really not about convenience. For the most part, the successful main streets, the financially successful main streets I see, so Virginia Highland in Atlanta, or King Street in Charleston. Yeah. That they are not about convenience. It is very much about experience and pleasure. Certainly, there's a huge part, I'd say more so in a non-tourist town like Atlanta. The intersection of Virginia and Highland is not a tourist thing. It's very much for the people of Atlanta, overwhelmingly. But my sense, having lived in Charleston for a good while, and the peninsula, while Charleston's kind of the percentage of its economy kind of became increasingly dominated by tourism, that this embrace of the experience economy in Charleston also came along with an embrace of the tourist in Charleston, and then local there, people for whom the community, I imagine, is presumed to exist, they didn't really have a reason to be on King Street, and I'm being a bit extreme because certainly this is not the case. There's certainly still some great businesses that are serving locals on Charleston, but overwhelmingly the restaurants the locals went to, and this is not necessarily more because of authenticity. The restaurants that the locals went to, they stopped being on King Street. They started to be in the harder to find, less obvious places. And what I saw in a main street, and this is a long-winded sort of critique or really question about the experience economy. What I saw on King Street was a move to sell Charleston's culture to people not familiar with Charleston's culture. And so over time, it became selling a caricature of Charleston's culture to people who weren't familiar enough with the culture to distinguish. And the culture that was there was, one, both getting diluted by this, and simply where it remained was kind of hidden or harder to find. That's sort of a vague critique of the experience economy. But can you speak to that some? Because I don't even quite know how to articulate that critique, but I sense it sort of around. If all we're buying is experiences, like what happened to our culture?
I think you're right. I lived, I don't know if it's considered the coastal empire, not the Low Country, coastal empire, in Savannah. And it had pretty much the same story that you are now telling, right? Mm-hmm. That the things for the local begin to be hidden, and you start to see the tourists with some sort of disdain because they are occupying every single space that you are.
If I may interrupt you briefly, Well, I was in Charleston. I lived south of Broad, and we love the tourists, and well, it's most of the time we love the tourists. Certainly, they are a huge benefit to the economy, at least in the immediate. But the people would come by, and I lived in this little tiny house on I think 23 King, the oldest still standing wood structure in Charleston. And rumored to have been built in 1671 or like forever ago, and it was wood, and it sort of tilted over, and it had a plaque on it that talked about it. And tourists would come by and they'd look at it, and I'd literally be sitting on my porch. You couldn't quite see me. It was a Charleston single house with, the wall that you get it. So you couldn't really see me. And I mean, this was in the late 90s, and people would literally like walk into the porch and start looking around, or occasionally I would, on more than one occasion, someone would flick a cigarette butt into my little courtyard, and I'm like, tourists. And there was a bumper sticker that was popular for a while that said, if they call it tourist season, how come you can't shoot? And that was kind of like we had this love-hate relationship, because even I was probably an interloper working in real estate in Charleston. But there's a love-hate relationship with the tourist economy in tourist towns, I found. And I don't know even, and I can't perfectly articulate where it comes from, but I have a sense that there's something vaguely parasitic about it. And so you have a point of view on that. So please.
There is. I was probably one of those tourists. I would have never flicked a cigarette butt into the backfield, but
I don't believe
I was most likely one of those tourists. I think that speaks to a problem of the broader economy and not a problem of tourism. And I see the fact that some places begin to be conquered by tourists as a signal that these places have been incredibly successful in retaining something that tourists want. So
I think that's well said.
Yeah. I would try to turn around and look at it from the other side. What is it that your town is not offering that I am now inundated under millions of tourists because my town does have it? So what good decisions has my town made that put us in a position of attracting so many tourists? And what puts other places in a position of not attracting tourists? We have maintained.
Yeah, I think that's a great artificial scarcity. Yeah. There's an imposed scarcity of beautiful places. Like if there were 10 times the number of Charlestons or Greenville, South Carolina Main Streets or Savannahs or Key Wests, if we still retained all those beautiful towns and things like people, there would certainly still be tourism, but you have an environment where 30% of the population any one day is a tourist, or 70% of the population, because it would all these places would have their own thriving little economies rather than a tourist economy.
Yeah, and it's also something it's also that something that happened to the broader economy and not just to tourism, right? Something broke along the way, and every single offer now has degraded, has become vacuous and plastic and devoid of purpose and devoid of authenticity. Not just the tourist offer. We were watching over the weekend. We were watching a movie with my wife. It's I think it's called Freud's Last Session or something. It's on Netflix, and it's a day-long conversation, fictitious, between Sigmund Freud in the last days of his life and C.S. Lewis. The real part.
Did they know each other? Were they actual?
Did
they really know each other?
We don't know. The real part is that Sigmund Freud was living in London, and he received the visit of an unnamed Cambridge professor very few days before he died. And there's a few accounts of that, but we don't know the name of we don't know who it was. So this movie says, what if it was C.S. Lewis? What if their conversation was about the nature of what man is seeking, about the nature of beliefs, about the nature of science versus religion? So it was a very interesting conversation. Gets heated at times, gets insulting and offending at times. And there's one scene in which there's one scene in which C.S. Lewis goes to study the Bible because he was a fervent atheist. And so someone is talking to him about these things. And later he was a very devout Catholic. So he starts studying the Bible. And he goes, of course, he's a Cambridge professor, so he has access to these amazing manuscripts. And he takes a manuscript that's written in ancient Greek. And he opens it and he reads it in ancient Greek. And my wife turns to me and says, wow, those were real people. And what she meant is, back then, a professor at the university would be absolutely well-versed in ancient Greek and Latin. And if not Aramaic or something else, right? Besides the 5 other languages, European languages that they spoke. And so they had a different way of looking at things, a different weight of moving around things. And I think that is something that has been evolving in not the best way. And it has a lot to do with how we see our capacity of looking into the future, right? So the economists call this the time preference, right?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, as the economy starts to get shaky, as the decisions that the people making those decisions about our economy are poorer, progressively poorer decisions, our capacity to plan ahead is reduced, right? If I am existing in a hyperinflation context, like the one I had to live in the late 90s in Ecuador, if we are existing in such a context, you cannot plan of investing money and seeing, okay, I will send one invoice every month to my clients and they will pay me. Because if I send an invoice every month, by the end of the year, I would actually charge maybe 20, maybe 25 or 30% of what was originally intended, and I will not be able to pay the bills. So what I need to do is I need to charge them everything right now. And if I can get them to pay me in US dollars as opposed to Ecuadorian sucres, that's even better, because that way I can make sure that my money will retain its value and it will not be completely diluted by the end of the year. So I have no capacity, no possibility of making long-term plans. And this is what happens. We have no possibility of making long-term plans. So what do we want people to do? We want people to buy something right now. We want people to give us the money right now. We offer something that we can give them tomorrow so that we can get paid today. So inevitably, if to make let's say I'm a sculptor and I'm creating some piece of art, if I take 4 or 5 or 6 months to create a single piece of art, that means I can create 2 pieces of art in a year, and I need to charge for those pieces of art enough so that I can live the entire year, because otherwise it doesn't make sense, right? If people cannot make plans in the long term, they would rather buy the sculptures that are made in series, that are made in bulk and massively produced somewhere in China probably, that will cost them a fraction of what I can charge. And of course, my trade is useless. And this is what begins to happen more and more when people don't have the opportunity to plan way ahead. So what is tourism right now? I snatch a low-cost ticket from that New York to Reykjavik to Rome, and I spend a weekend in Rome. So I have exactly, 45 hours in Rome, so I need to go to see everything that I need to see, and I do this horrible, vicious, unsustainable, and really meaningless tourism, because Colosseum picture, the Forum picture, the Basilica picture, leave, eat, have a pizza, fast, move. And this is a tourism that really destroys the essence of people going into Rome and looking at buildings and looking at manuscripts and going into crypts and sitting for hours in a church, seeing how the Pantheon, seeing how every 21st of April the oculus of the Pantheon lets the sun in right on the door of the Pantheon, so that the emperor could walk in with bathed in sun. And these effects, if I have 45 hours in Rome, I have no time to stand on the Pantheon and wait until that happens, right? And that is the essence of tourism now. It lacks purpose, it lacks authenticity, it lacks everything that going into a place and absorbing what the place has to offer gives you. You don't do that anymore. You just go and take a picture, take a selfie, put it on Instagram, and move on to the next city. And that's
I love that connection between time preference.
Time preference. And that has happened with every aspect of the economy. Yeah. That's the origin of our housing crisis, is the same thing, right? I need a house now. So what happens? I have to build the highest amount of houses that I can with the cheapest materials possible, because right now I have a permit for 500 houses, and that's it, because it's so hard to get a permit, and also it's so risky to invest, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years. The rates are going to go up, rates are going to go down. What is happening? I have no chance of planning, so I try to do it as fast as possible, grind the meat as fast as possible, and move on to the next. And that is
so the time preference with regard to time. I love how you make the connection between time preference and tourism and culture, and then sort of the caricaturization of a place's culture and time preference. And so to make sure I would get those terms right, because it's easy for me to confuse them, a high time preference is a state where you would put a great deal of priority on the immediacy moment right now.
Correct.
And a low time preference is one where you are much more concerned with the quality or the substance or the utility or the meaning than you are of the immediacy. So low time preference society would be, I don't know if I imagine it was, but I was probably operating in a very low time preference setting as he was working on the David or the Sistine Chapel or whatever.
Yes.
And someone who's, manufacturing 10 million rubber ducks for sale and, selling those in a month. Exactly. That's someone who's operating in a high time preference society.
Exactly. This country was built on low time preference.
You see it in these. I mean, now we'll go into architecture, which is a thing, or architecture and building, which is, of course, a thing we both love. But in the attention and craftsmanship on what were just, normal everyday objects, from including like a wood stove or a wheel or a fire hydrant or a street lamp. These everyday little objects, the attention given to them, the art, the pride that went into them, you totally see this low time preference setting for I mean, surely there's survivor bias in there, because the stuff that sticks around is the stuff we love, but you do kind of have the sense, looking at pictures, that there's a much higher percentage of great beauty, artistry, enduring qualities, and older goods that were manufactured, older buildings in the 1800s relative to now. I mean, geez, I lived in a wooden house that was built in the late 1600s. That's kind of amazing that it's still there. I'm asking this because I kind of know some of the answers, but I love hearing them. Like, what's your hypothesis for why we're a high time preference society now?
Number one hypothesis is the economic order that we have going on right now. You very aptly described it as cronyism. I think that is precisely the term I would utilize. When things change and you don't feel in control of the fruits of your labor anymore, then you start
when you're no longer a yeoman.
When you're no longer a yeoman, you start increasing or raising your time preference. Mm-hmm. And there's other factors also that you see happening, that you see around you, and that eventually change your mind and change everyone's mind. And the demand for fast and quick things is, of course, much higher, because if you lower the entire if you increase the entire population's time preference, if you lower their standards, they inevitably will seek things that are instant reward. Mm-hmm. And as we seek instant reward, we start debasing everything around us, right? I want a book, but if I see the movie, it's going to be 2 hours. The book's going to be 3 days. Guess what? Going with the movie. The movie is as different from the book as whatever the screenwriter and director understood about the book. So it's coming to you from 3 steps away from the original source of knowledge. So we're leaving the sources of knowledge for someone else to process. And the way that culture is built, it's built through rituals. If I have a wooden stove, the basic ritual I need, even if I am loaded and have servants, those servants need to bring me the wood, and need to put the wood into the stove, and need to wait until the wood is burnt and the stove starts heating. And then that stove doesn't just cook, that stove heats the kitchen. So we're all sitting around the stove, and this is where stories get told. This is when there's a storm outside and I don't have an iPhone. I'm just sitting around my family. This is the time when stories get told. This is the time when traditions are kept alive, right? So there's a ritual behind the wood, the wooden stove, the time that it takes me to, turn the wood on. There's a ritual for turning on gas lamps every day in a city. Someone needs to come and open the gas and get the flame and get those lamps lit, right? And there's a progression. Someone has to wait until the lamp, I don't know the name of the person who lit the gas lamps, I'm sure there's a name. We have to wait. If
the
we
lamplighter.
What? Lamplighter? If we're at the end of the block, we have to wait until they come to our lamp. We can't just flick a switch and every lamp comes on. Right now, we don't see any of that. If I wanted to go from town A to town B, I had to bring out my horse, saddle the horse, hook it up to the cart if I was going to use a car, or mount, and I had to go to the other place. Right now, there's no rituals associated with anything that we do. Our cars are produced somewhere in China, probably. If we drive electric cars, our electricity is produced somewhere that we don't see. It may be produced as cleanly or as horribly we have no idea because our car is clean and pristine and has no emissions and it doesn't make a sound, and we drive and we want lights and we go and flick a switch and it's on. When dusk comes, every single street light comes on and gives a very bright light that I can walk and nothing's going to happen. So we have lost the ritual part of building culture. This is why we cannot build culture anymore, because there's nothing to bring us into a ritual. And I'm sure we can find it back. Experiences find it back.
I think they create stories and relationships and things you want to hold on for a long time of enduring and tangible value. As you were telling the story of the wood stove, I love trees. But I immediately thought, like, not only do you have to do all those things for the wood stove, but you need to plant the tree and grow the tree. What greater expression of low time preference than to go out and plant a tree? If for the 13 people that will listen to this out there, if you're looking for a low time preference thing to do, go out and plant a tree. That's a good one.
Exactly. A tree that you will not see.
I feel like, exactly. Yeah. I feel like I have to say, I feel like you evaded my question a little bit. And
I would happily answer.
think you described low time preference and how low time preference impacts us and attributes of low time preference. I don't feel like you really got specific around why you think we have moved from relatively low time preference generally to relatively high time preference currently. Like, what happened? Like, why did that happen? Is it just like it just happened? I don't think it just happened.
No, I think it's a policy. Actually, I know it's a policy. It's when money is bad, we stop planning far ahead. Mm-hmm. When money is even worse, that far ahead gets closer and closer and closer until it's tomorrow. I was mentioning the high inflation places. Me personally, I have the experience of getting paid and going out to buy something that I knew how much it cost and not being able to buy it because it had already gone up. And this is a question of days.
Yeah, how does that? Well, I'm with you, and maybe we could go into it, maybe not. But certainly the softening of money,
correct,
where it has led to that, and that would have begun in the very early 1900s here in this country. But what was my question? It just. Oh yeah. So how did you, like in Ecuador or wherever this is happening, a big deal? Like, how do people how does it even work in a period of like hyperinflation? How does it work? I don't understand. Like, how do you transact with things? How do people like practically deal with the day-to-day of transacting? Do they just barter? Like, surely not, or maybe that's part of it. I don't know. How do people get around that?
I will tell you, but I will go back to the question because I do want to answer.
Okay, good.
There's a lot of bartering. There's a desperation for paydays. As soon as you get your money, you run to the store and you buy whatever you can at whatever price it is, because you know tomorrow it's going to be higher. So there's the people are.
Do you hoard them? Do people begin to hoard?
People begin to hoard, of course. You buy things that are not gonna go bad. Of course, people begin to hoard.
Yeah.
People begin to barter. People begin to be creative, and so maybe you start a little urban orchard in your backyard, because you know that if you can at least take the burden away from buying herbs and spices, that something in your budget is going to be controlled. It's better. And so people start to get creative. People start to get to find different ways of buying. But the main thing that people do is people flock to harder money. So mainly when people of lower quintiles got paid, they ran to the store to buy whatever they can. When people of the higher quintiles get paid, immediately they go to the foreign exchange and buy US dollars. And this is how.
And it's not necessarily they don't get hard money; they get harder money.
Well, in the 80s and 90s, the US dollar was very hard money.
Right.
Still.
Yeah.
And so
I'd say that like I was paying attention. I had no idea. Yeah.
No. It sounded because it is true. So anyway, we do purchase. We did purchase the US dollar. So it was people were allowed to have US dollar accounts. So you could open a US dollar account in Ecuador. You could they call it the mattress bank, because people would go and purchase the US dollars and keep them underneath their mattress in their homes because they didn't believe in the banking system. And so at the time of going to the store, you would just go to the street and find some dude with a very big dollar bill or whatever sucre bill package, and you would just give them $10 and they would give them your huge amount of local currency, and you would go to the store and purchase on the store. So you would be selling your dollars at the moment that you need them.
Right. And that's just how it was. That's how everything worked. That's how it was. Yeah.
That's how it was. So I go back to
a nation where. Well, before I let you go back, I'm so curious about this. So in a nation where it's illegal to transact in a harder money, what happens there? I guess there's a black market for. I guess
there's a black market like in Argentina. Yes, there's a black market like in Argentina. So Argentina had a very controlled foreign exchange market. You could only get dollars if you were going to travel, and that was a limited amount. And you could only get dollars if you were an exporter. You would have to render your dollars to the government. And if you are an importer, you can get dollars, but they had a different rate, and it was a weird arrangement that they had that thankfully the current president, I think, has eliminated. But basically there was a huge black market. So the official US dollar in Argentina was 300 pesos, but they call it the blue market. But the blue dollar was 1,000. So if you came with dollars and you would sell your dollar, you would get 1,000 pesos. And things can go up, right? During inflation, things can go up. They have to go up because that's the inflation event. But they cannot go up so much that they will bankrupt places. So if you have a restaurant, you need to put your prices up, but you cannot start charging $1,000 for a steak, because nobody will buy the steak and your restaurant will stop selling, right? So there's a limit to what people can increase prices, and so yeah, people go and if there's no restriction to the foreign exchange market, which was the case in Ecuador, so you could buy and sell as many US dollars as you wanted, but there was a restriction on the payments, so you couldn't make payments in US dollar officially. Everyone accepted them because everyone was happy to get harder money, right? So when they dollarized the economy, the Ecuadorian economy right now uses the US dollar. That is our currency. We don't have currency, and we don't have a currency, a monetary policy, which has been a godsend for the country. Taking that power of creating monetary policy away from the government has been a godsend for the country. It was
what year was that? When did that happen?
2000. It was brutal at the beginning because the exchange rates went up and everything was crazy, and they froze everyone's deposits, and they exchanged the dollar accounts into the local currency, and then they gave you the equivalent in dollars. So if you had, 100,000 sucres, which before the change was, $1,000, after the exchange, they made all the calculations, and you had, maybe $100. So you got a tiny fraction of your original deposit in dollars because they made all the Anyway, it was brutal at the beginning, but it has kept inflation at a very steady 2 or 3%. It has not allowed prices and housing and education and everything to go up ridiculously high like it has here, and healthcare and everything. It's expensive, and it's very expensive because sometimes they have to import things and whatever. But there's no price uncontrolled price hikes like we have here, right? So now I go back Now I go back to the question.
Good. Yeah, I'll let you go back.
Yeah. So when that happens, when people start losing faith in the hardness of the currency, the time preference starts to retreat. It begins to be higher. And specifically, 1913, the creation of the Federal Reserve, things happened. 1935, the confiscation of gold, things kept happening. And then 1971, which was the final abandonment of the gold standard. So starting in 1971, banks in the US could create money from thin air. And so you don't care how much things cost, right? So you can have 100 agencies imposing 100 different standards in construction, for example, because the people who are going to be building are close to the banks who will create them money from thin air. And so they'll be able to pay for everything, that all the new compliance on the new whatever rules that are imposed. And so the bigger corporations that are closer to the money printing, they are able to conjure up money and pay for whatever extra compliance costs. So things just start going up. If there's no limit for how much I can pay, there's also no limit for how many rules they can enact. And if there is no limit because the money has no value basically, then things just start to go up. And if you look at what the most regulated industries are, those are the industries that have gone uncontrollably skyrocketed high prices. So I'm talking about healthcare, I'm talking about higher education, I'm talking about construction, or housing. What else? There's got to be something else. And the ones that are pretty much not regulated, I can come up with a new TV and sell that TV. Technology has
electronics, software,
electronics and software are dirt cheap right now. So if you look at the first cell phones, they had no services, no nothing. They could just make a phone call, and it was crazy expensive. And they cost $3,000. So now you can buy a phone for $80, Chinese phone for $80, and have games and connectivity and internet and WhatsApp and Facebook and whatever, and with very dirt cheap. So electronics is one example of industries that have not had a need to be closer to this conjuring up or printing of money. So I put the blame on the high preference of the population, on the fact that in 1971 banks were allowed to conjure up money from thin air, and so it doesn't matter how much things cost. What matters is that you have a big enough company, the corporations, the enterprise you were talking about in the beginning. What matters is that one of those enterprises or companies will be closer to the banks and get the means to pay for whatever extra costs that are imposed. And what is the byproduct of this is that it creates a moat. It creates a moat. And if I am a small developer and I want to build, I have to go through the same compliance that a huge corporation has to go through. And it will be maybe a year and a half or maybe 2 years until my permits are approved. And I simply cannot afford to sit on land for 2 years because I'm paying a mortgage. If I am a huge corporation.
Yeah, and you also can't afford, you're a boutique developer and you have, 3 employees or some small number. You can't afford to have 7 full-time employees working totally on compliance or totally on entitlements to spread that.
Correct. So it's a moat.
So 9 projects at a time. Yeah, it's even in the, well, I hate to, whine about it. But it is, you just kind of see the difference in the last 3 decades in real estate development of the entitlements effort required to secure a permit to build is so much higher. Simultaneously, the percentage of construction done, real estate development done by financialized real estate development entities is way higher as well. Those two things are directly related, I think.
And we look at the quality.
Yeah, and it is harder, and it's harder too to sell. Exactly, yeah, it's harder for a really, really giant financialized to deliver something with soul and with this place. It's really hard for them to do that. Impossible, maybe.
If you buy 10,000 windows, you'll be able to get maybe a 2 or maybe 20-cent discount per window. And if you're buying millions, those discounts are going to matter to the bottom line. If you're a developer buying 10 windows for a house, it's brutal on your bottom line. So it creates a moat. It makes everything harder for the small developers, and it makes everything easier for the standardization. So if you look even at McDonald's restaurants, if you look at the McDonald's restaurants in the 1970s and you look at the McDonald's restaurants right now, it's an entire different company, even, right? It's before you went, and it was the magic and the trees and the purple apples and everything was cozy and wooden and you love to be there. And right now, not loving it. I mean, it's It's
kind of a sad place now. It's
sad
weird.
Place. I'm cheap.
Well, we need to stop belly aching because we're just belly aching right now.
True.
I want to come back to Main Street Mavericks and some things in there that are not, that I think are really positive and optimistic areas to focus. And that is on these things that are practically impossible to be commodified. This sort of authenticity, storytelling, connection to play. They are resistant to commodification, and they fall apart when someone attempts to commodify those. And I think at the heart of your book, at least what I've read so far, and not all the way through it, that's you're banging the drum of that for in a economy, community, culture that has so many pressures for us to be high time preference. You're championing authentic interactions as the way, like that is guerrilla warfare for the small business owner, is authenticity. Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say, and it's also fair to say that there's a huge market for that. I think it was PricewaterhouseCoopers who put out a report on the experience economy, and they're talking about around 86% of people are willing to pay a premium for a great experience. Mm-hmm. And the average amount that people are willing to pay more for a great experience is 16%. So if you're going to buy something at $100, you're going to pay $116 if it comes with a great experience. And there's lots of statistics and trends and things that are pointing us to the fact that, yes, online shopping and retailing is growing. Yes, big boxes are able to offer a type of convenience, a financial convenience that is imperative, especially when people see that inflation is growing and their purchasing power is lessening. But if you are in a downtown and you come in contact with this amazing place, and you come in contact with the hosts of this downtown, which is what I'm advocating for the top percentage of businesses to become. And these are the businesses, using the Pareto principle. These are the 20% of businesses that are bringing 80% of sales and 80% of foot traffic, right? So these are the anchor businesses that are they are becoming the most important ones in a downtown. They are driving the vitality of the downtown anyway, right? And so when they realize that they are first and foremost in a hospitality business, that they are in an entertainment business, and they become hosts and they become entertainers, they will grab much more of the time of people who come to downtown. They will grab a lot more of the attention of people who are coming to downtown, and that time and that attention will translate in people looking at the neighbors and, I came to have a steak here. It's been 2 hours and I'm having a greatest time. And then I see some performance in the shop next door. What is this shop next door selling? Oh, it's selling handmade cosmetics. This is so fantastic. I'm going to go in. Oh, it smells so wonderful. And you end up purchasing something else. And this tiny handmade cosmetics place is benefiting from the show that the steakhouse is putting up. And this is the way to elevate the entire downtown. This is the way to creating a context that is very good for starting a business. And this is what I'm trying to achieve in the long run. Creating great places that are very functional and very attractive for entrepreneurs to come and invest their time and their money to create a progressing and a prosperous local economy.
Your book strikes me as being written. Anybody would enjoy picking it up and reading it. I would say particularly written for real estate developers who might be not merely real estate developers who might be building urban environments, walkable, mixed use, commercial retail places, retailers in those settings, urbanists in general, and then also people who are actively working on making their Main Street districts more prosperous, more vital, more active, helping them become the best places they can be, turning all those shops, those shop owners, those employees there into hosts of their cities and towns and communities. Is that my take of your business, Storefront Mastery? Is those tend to be your clients? Is that right? It is both the retailers per se, perhaps, but also more so the Main Street districts. Is that right?
Correct. It's what I call the place managers. So it's anyone who is in charge of working towards creating a very vital local economy. So it may be a Main Street manager. It may be an executive director of a bid. It may be the person in charge of operations and activation in a private developer, right? It's anyone who is in charge of making the built environment amazing so that it becomes a destination and it becomes a great place for entrepreneurs.
When you think, and I meant to raise this, you talked about the premium people will pay for the experience. I was trying to think about where I've really loved my experiences in retail environments. And I want to say there's many of them are just personal, like to know the person that I'm dealing with, like to have that, to know that I'm part of the community that person is in, and they're part of the community I'm in. Whether it's I think about a friend who recently moved to Gaines, Georgia from downtown Atlanta, and two friends, and they were initially concerned that there wouldn't be the vitality that they experience in downtown and midtown from the restaurants, shops, and so forth. But they quickly found it smaller. Of course, there's less. when they share the experiences they have, they talk about the owner of this. How they love saying hello to them. They talk about the regular bartender they see at whatever this little bar around the corner, and they talk about all these really personal exchanges they have, these personal connections. And it seems to me that is an advantage that is maybe appreciated. I guess it's almost trite to say, maybe it's not underappreciated, but it's things that will always be the advantage held by the small local retailer or the main street with the several dozen little companies that,
correct,
are all part of that community and you're part of it. And you're working hard. You're working on helping those people express that, express that and make those connections.
They are naturally hosts of their downtowns.
Yeah,
they're the natural hosts. They are
hosts. I love how that's how you describe it. That's exactly what they are. Yeah. That's right. They're like, they've welcomed you into their
home,
their living room or their kitchen. Yeah, their home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what are some of the great things you're working on right now? What are some of where are you working now?
Okay, so the last adventure, which it's shaping right now, and I don't know what it's going to shape. It was what it's going to look like in the end, which is why I'm very happy to share it. And if you or anyone has a cool idea that I can incorporate or help me shape it further, would be great. So I became a member of an organization called the World Experience Organization. And this is a network of individuals that are working in experience creation in different capacities. Maybe they are amusement park designers. Maybe they are production designers for a movie studio, different things, right? So essentially people who are creating great experiences for profit. And this could be in restaurants, this could be in events or museums, whatever. And so I've been with this idea that I have that I need an angle to bring the experience economy to Main Street, which is the reason behind me writing Main Street Mavericks. So I've began to network with the people. So I've reached out to people sending cold messages. Hi, I'm Jaime. I'm doing this. My thing is to bring the experience economy to the Main Street market, which has not even looked at the experience economy before. And let's chat. And everyone has responded. Every single person I've reached out to has responded, which I think is unusual for such an organization. Anyway,
that's a high conversion rate on a cold outreach.
Very high conversion rate on cold messages too.
Yeah.
And so I've been meeting with people, and one of the things that stands out is people that are doing things, they're not so much concerned with the borders and the limits of the performative aspect of what they do. I spoke to a guy that creates games, and his game was Pac-Man. It's called Pac-Manhattan. It's Pac-Man played with real people in real life on Washington Square Park in New York City. So they transformed Washington Square Park into a Pac-Man game, and people were playing.
I think I heard about this.
If you think of the boundless and limitless character of something like this, and you think of how successful would this be in a small town Main Street that everyone is playing a game. It would just be amazing. So this is what
it's kind of like a modern parade, but like a modern, more interactive parade where everybody comes together for that.
In the early 80s, we had a East German game show that was shown in Ecuadorian television. And it was called Telematch.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. This is like a Soviet era.
The Soviets,
East German.
this was the Democratic Republic of Germany. And these were towns that organized as teams and went on to do different contests. And these contests would be like, it would be a very quaint ninja warrior. So they had to roll logs and go from one side of the river to the other. And this was an actual river. It was not a pool, pristine and clean and everything. It was an actual river that they had to go through, And so they had these runners with huge heads, with the colors and the flags and the crests of the different towns, and they would be running with the big heads and bumping into each other. It was just a ridiculous game show, but it was a lot of camaraderie, and it was super funny. And kids were playing, and adults were playing, and people from different towns, and doing with cheers and everything. So it was amazing, and the entire town becomes the board of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the entire population of the town becomes the players, the tokens in the game, and the entire day becomes game day. And the interaction that this brings, and the opportunities that it brings, it's like a festival on steroids with lots of opportunities to interact and to create something, and hotbed for entrepreneurs. Can you just imagine you dump 20 entrepreneurs in this context and you tell them just go and create something? The things that they might create, it could just be fabulous. So I think that is the future of innovation in Main Street businesses.
Mm-hmm. It will be a fun future. And I look forward to. I'm enjoying the part of it we're playing in now, and I look forward to where it takes us. My guest today has been Jaime Izurieta. He is the owner of Storefront Mastery. He's the author of several books, including most recently Main Street Mavericks. I recommend you guys go out and get this, especially if you're in urbanism, retail, placemaking, that sort of field. Jaime, can you tell us where people can find you, where they can find your work?
Of course, they can find every single bit of information in my website. It's storefrontmastery.com. Storefrontmastery.com. There you will find information about me, information about the book, and all the other books. Also, there's if you scroll down, you'll see a bright pink section. That's going to be
this color.
The bright pink section. That's going to be the Main Street Mavericks section, and it'll take you to the main book site. And it's available there. I'm not selling it on Amazon. I'm selling it on in Lulu, which is the print-on-demand service that I chose.
That was pretty cool. So you buy it, and it's like they're going out and they print my one copy and they send it to me. I guess that's how it works, right?
That's how it works. Yes.
Yeah. And also, that's not the only place they can find you. You and I met, I don't know, a couple years, 2 or 3 years ago on Twitter.
On Twitter, now X.
Your handle is now X. Is your handle there also Storefront Mastery? I can't remember.
Sadly, they don't admit so many characters. So my handle is my last name. Both my last names. In Spanish, we have 2 last names. So my handle is Izurieta-Varea. But if you look for me by name, Jaime Izurieta, then you'll get me.
Yeah, I will. That'll be in the show notes. You'll see that in a second. But Jaime is a great follow, and he talks about both things, including things about retailing main streets, creating great, wonderful experiences. He also has great observations about economics, the broader built environment, life in general. Thank you so much for joining us. Delighted to have you as our guest here. My guest here. It's just me, really have a little bit of help on Yeoman. Great to talk to you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. It's great to be part of the cavalry.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.